I hope you'll agree that the lineup of speakers and panelists today has been really quite exceptional. I was not referring to myself, of course. I am happy to report that we're going to end the day on a very high note. John Boehner has represented his district in Ohio for nearly 22 years. As the 61st Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner is at the center of every critical policy decision in Washington. I look forward to hearing the Speaker's thoughts on how the fiscal situation, particularly in December and January, will or should unfold, and how the deadlines will influence Republican plans to deal with our long-term deficits. I suspect that as one of 12 children, Speaker Boehner knows a fair amount about negotiation and compromise. So I am also interested in his views on how we can work across party lines and reach out to Americans of all persuasions to find agreement on the tough decisions that will have to be made. Following his remarks, Speaker Boehner will be interviewed by Erin Burnett, host of CNN's nightly news program, Erin Burnett, OutFront, and Erin is also CNN's chief business and economics correspondent. Please welcome Speaker John Boehner and Erin Burnett.
Thank you, Pete. Well, Pete, thank you for that introduction. And let me just say to all of you, it's an honor to be with you in this historic Mellon Auditorium. It was here in the spring of 1949 that the United States and our closest allies gathered to sign the North Atlantic Treaty, giving birth to NATO. On that occasion, President Truman declared that people with courage and vision can still determine their own destiny. They can choose freedom or slavery. You know, in our time, all of these great nations face a grave threat to freedom, one from within. And that is their debt and our debt. It's shackling our economies and smothering the opportunities that have blessed us with so much. And once again, the world looks to the United States for what it always has, an example. It's the example of a free people whose hard work and sacrifice make up the sum total of thriving towns and a vibrant economy. It's a humble government that lives within its means and unleashes the potential of first-rate ideas and world-class products. It's a nation never content with the status quo and always on the move. I got a glimpse of this example growing up, working in my dad's bar just outside of Cincinnati, and then lived a piece of this own dream myself when I ran my own small business. And instead of the shining example, what does the world now see? A president on whose watch the United States lost its gold-plated AAA rating for the first time in our history. A Senate controlled by the president's party that hasn't passed a budget in more than 3 years. And earlier this month, another unemployment report showing that the world's greatest economy remains unable to generate enough jobs to spur strong and lasting economic growth. If you should know one thing about me, it's that I'm an optimist. Yes, our times are tough, but our future doesn't have to be dark. We don't have to accept the new normal where the workplace looks more like a battlefield and families have to endure flat incomes, weak job prospects, and higher prices in their daily lives. We have every reason to believe we can come out of this freer and more prosperous than ever. And if we will, we can confront our challenges now while we still have the ability to do so. For the solution to what ails our economy is not the government, it's the American people. The failure of stimulus, a word people in Washington refuse to say anymore, has sparked a rebellion against overspending, overtaxation, and overregulation. Americans who take pride in living on a budget recognize that we can't go on spending money that we don't have, and our economy is stuck in large part because it is stuck with debt. Nationwide, we're seeing a groundswell of support for bold ideas that reject small politics, cast off big government, and return us to common sense, the kind of ideas, common sense and first principles, the kind of ideas that will restore prosperity and substantially improve the trajectory of our economy. In March, as part of our plan for America's job creators, the House passed an honest budget with real spending cuts, a pro-growth tax reform, and serious entitlement reform. It's far-reaching in its effort to control government's worst habits and capitalize on the American people's best. And this budget gets our fiscal house in order and promotes long-term growth. Far from settling for stability, it offers a true path to prosperity. Various bipartisan commissions and coalitions have devised their own ambitious plans as well. And the math may be different and the mix a little different, but the goals are mainly the same. And of course, there are summits like these that bring together people who just happen to get it. Of course, while I'm happy to be here, and I'm sure we're all enjoy being in each other's company, we could also agree that we've probably talked this problem to death. It's about time we roll up our sleeves and get to work. For all the focus on Election Day, I think there's another date that looms large for every household and every business in America, and that's January 1, 2013. On that day, without congressional action, a sudden, massive tax increase will be imposed on every American by an average of about $3,000 per household. Rates go up, the child tax credit is cut in half, the AMP taxes end, the estate tax returns to 2001 levels, and so on. Now, it gets a little more complicated than that. What will expire on January 1 is a cause for concern. It's what will take effect beyond that that concerns me greatly. Indiscriminate spending cuts of $1.2 trillion, half of which would devastate our men and women in uniform and send a signal of weakness. Several tax increases from the health care law that's making it harder for employers to hire new workers, as well as a slate of new energy and banking rules and regulations that will also increase the strain on the private sector. But it gets even more complicated than that. Sometime after the election, the federal government will near the statutory debt limit. This end-of-the-year pileup, commonly referred to as the fiscal cliff, is a chance for us to bid farewell permanently to the era of so-called timely, temporary, and targeted short-term government interventions. You know, for years, Washington has force-fed our economy with a constant diet of meddling, micromanagement, and manipulation. None of it has been a substitute for long-term economic investment, private initiative, and freedom. Now, previous Congresses have encountered lesser precipices with lower stakes and made a beeline for the closest lame duck escape hatch. Now, let me put your mind at ease. This Congress will not follow that path if I have anything to do with it. Having run a business, I know that failing to plan is planning to fail, that the real pain comes from doing nothing. Austerity is what will become necessary if we do nothing now. We'll wake up one day with no choice in the matter. And there's also no salvation to be found in doing anything to just get by, to just get through this year. Nothing is not an option, and anything is not a plan. To get on the path to prosperity, we've got to avoid the fiscal cliff, but we need to start today. And to show my intentions are sincere, I'll start with the stickiest issue, and that, of course, is the debt limit. On several occasions in the past, the debt limit has been the catalyst for real budget agreements. Last year, however, the president requested a quote unquote clean increase of the debt limit, business as usual. Well, I've run a business, and that's no way to do it. It's certainly no way to run a government either, especially one that's run up a debt bigger than the entire economy. So business as usual will no longer do. So last year around this time, I accepted an invitation to address the Economic Club of New York. I went up there and said that, in my view, the debt limit exists in statute precisely so that government is forced to address its fiscal issues. Yes, allowing America to default on its debt would be irresponsible. But it would be more irresponsible to raise the debt ceiling without taking dramatic steps to reduce spending and reform the budget process. Now, we shouldn't dread the debt limit. Matter of fact, I think we should welcome it. It's an action-forcing event in a town that's become infamous for inaction. You know, that night in New York, I put forward a principle that we should not raise the debt ceiling without real spending cuts and reforms that exceed the amount of the debt limit increase. Now, from all the way up in Midtown Manhattan, I could hear the great wailing and gnashing of teeth. And over the next couple of months, I was asked again and again if I would yield on my position, that if I would budge. Each and every time, I said no, because it isn't a position, it's a principle. Not just that it's the right thing to do, it is the right thing to do. When the time comes, I will again insist on my simple principle of cuts and reforms greater than the debt limit increase. Now, this is the only avenue I see right now to force the elected leadership of this country to solve our structural fiscal imbalance. Now, that means we have to do a series of stopgap measures, so be it. But that's not the ideal. Let's start solving the problem, and let's start solving it today. We can make the bold reforms and cuts necessary to meet this principle, and I believe that we must. So, just so we're all clear, I'm talking about real cuts and real reforms, not tricks and gimmicks that have given Washington a pass on grappling with the spending problem. Last year in my negotiations with the White House, the president and his team put a number of gimmicks on the table. Now, there's a lot of thought and creativity that went into this, things like counting money that was never going to be spent anyway as savings. Now, maybe in another time with another speaker, gimmicks like this would be acceptable. But as a matter of simple arithmetic, they will not work. They won't work, and as I told the president, we're not doing those things that way anymore. What also doesn't count as cuts and reforms are tax increases. Tax hikes destroy jobs, especially an increase in the magnitude that's set for the first of the year. Small businesses need to plan, and we shouldn't wait until New Year's Eve to give American job creators the confidence that they aren't going to get hit with a big tax increase on New Year's Day. Any sudden tax hike would hurt our economy. So this fall, before the election, the House of Representatives will vote to stop the largest tax increase in American history. So we'll give Congress time to work on broad-based tax reform that lowers rates for individuals and businesses while closing deductions, credits, and special carve-outs. Eyebrows go up all over town whenever I talk about this. But when I say broad-based tax reform, I mean it. We need to do it all. Deal with the whole code, personal and corporate, to make it fairer and productive for all Americans. And that's why our bill to stop this New Year's Day tax increase will also establish an expedited process by which the Congress would enact real tax reform in 2013. This process would look something like how we handled the Trade Promotion Authority, where you put in place a timeline for both houses to act. The Ways and Means Committee will work out all the details, but the bottom line is this. If we do this right, we'll never have to deal with the uncertainty of expiring tax rates again. We'll have replaced the broken status quo with a tax code that maintains progressivity, taxes income once, and creates a fairer, simpler code. And if we do that right, we'll see increased revenue from more economic growth. And again, a change doesn't have to be sudden or painful. You know, last year when I addressed the Economic Club of Washington, I said that making relatively small changes now can lead to huge dividends down the road in terms of debt reduction. As we approach the issue of the debt limit again, we need to continue to bear this in mind. And as you know, we could eliminate all the unfunded liabilities in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid tomorrow, and the effect on the congressional budget 10-year window could be minimal. That's because changes to these programs take time and need to be phased in slowly. For example, when Congress last increased the retirement age for Social Security, the increase was a mere 2-year increase, but it was scheduled to fully take effect over a 40-year period. Another example, take the House budget resolutions and assumptions for Medicare reform. Those will not even begin until after 2022. Smart and modest changes today means huge dividends down the road. Now, I can already hear the grumbles. Partisans on both sides getting all worked up, or people saying, let's just wait until the election's over. Well, we can't wait. Employers large and small are already bracing for the coming tax hikes and the regulations which freeze them in place. The markets aren't going to wait forever. Eventually, they're going to start reacting. And we know now that to ignore these warnings, we will do so at our own peril. That's why the House will do its part to ease the uncertainty surrounding this fiscal cliff. And I hope the President will step up and bring his party and the Senate leaders along and work with us. Because if there's one action-forcing event that trumps all of the rest, even the debt limit, it's presidential leadership. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe President Obama cares about this country and knows what the right thing to do is. But knowing what's right and doing what's right are two different things. And the difference between knowing what's right and doing what's right is courage. And the president, I'm sorry to say, lost his courage last summer. He was willing to talk about the tough choices that we needed to preserve and strengthen our entitlement programs, but he wasn't ready to take action. As it turned out, he wouldn't agree to the most basic entitlement reforms unless it was accompanied by a tax increase on small business job creators. We were on the verge of an agreement that would have reduced the deficit by trillions of dollars by strengthening entitlement programs, reforming the tax code with permanently lower rates for all, and laying the foundation for lasting economic growth. But when the president saw his former colleagues in the Senate getting ready to press for tax hikes, he lost his nerve. The political temptation became too great. He moved the goalpost, changed his stance, and demanded tax hikes. Now, we ended up enacting a package with cuts and reforms larger than the hike, but it could have been so much more. And the letdown was considerable. And in turn, our nation's credit rating was downgraded for the first time. Well, it should also be the last time that happens, which is why I came here today. If the president continues to put politics before principle or party before country, as he often accuses others of doing, our economy is going to suffer. And we'll miss our last chance to solve this crisis on our own terms. But if we have leaders who will lead, and if we have leaders with the courage to make the tough choices and the vision to pursue a future paved with growth, then we can heal our economy again, and we can be the example for all to follow. Listen, I'm ready, and I've been ready. I'm not angling for some higher office. This is the last position in government I'll ever have. But I haven't come this far to just walk away. All my life, I've operated on a pretty simple principle. If you do the right things for the right reasons, good things will happen. Well, now is the time to do the right thing. Let's do it for the right reasons. We don't need to be dragged kicking and screaming. Frankly, that's not the American way. Let's summon the courage and vision to choose freedom, to choose prosperity, and to determine our own destiny. Then we'll not only succeed in solving this crisis, but we'll be worthy of that success. I just want to say thanks to all of you for being part of this conference. Thank Pete for his leadership on this issue, and I'll look forward to having a very productive interview with Erin. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. And I just wanted to start off by, well, I had an idea for saving some money, first of all. Air conditioning in this place, if they turned it down a little bit, I don't know, probably a couple $1,000 we could send.
I don't know, it feels pretty good to me.
It's like sitting next to Mark Haynes. We had that fight every single morning. I wanted to start by asking you, just sort of in a nutshell, if you had to say, how bad is it? People talk about fiscal cliff. We talk about sort of a fiscal Armageddon coming our way. How bad is the situation right now for us?
Well, one only has to look at what's happening in Greece today, what's happening in Spain, much less Portugal, Ireland. I can go down the long list, where they've waited too long. And as a result, the markets are going to dictate what happens there. And their ability to solve their own problems has all but diminished. And so as I look toward the end of this year, there's no reason for Washington to just kick the can down the road, where we put the next election in front of the next generation. We've got a serious problem coming at us. But I'll say this, regardless of what happens in the election, the electorate will take care of that. The next 2 years could be the most consequential 2 years we see in Washington and have seen in the last 50 or 60 years, because these problems are not going to go away. And we can't cut our way to prosperity, nor can we grow our way out of the problem. I think there are three big components that we need to embark on if we're serious about solving this problem. Well, one, we need real economic growth. To get real economic growth, we've got to reform our tax code, as I said, both personal and corporate. Lower the rates, make it fairer for everyone, and we need to get the regulatory juggernaut in this government off the backs of the private sector. Listen, I want clean water, I want clean air, but my God, the regulatory nightmare is scaring every employer in the country. So if we get the regulatory juggernaut under control, we have real tax reform. The third component is we've got to do something about our spending. Today, we've got 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. That's 70,000 a week. That's 3.5 million people this year. And this is just the beginning of the baby boom bubble. So this is going to go on for the next 20, 25 years. And that's why it's so important for us to begin to solve this problem. In 1990, when I was the first-time candidate for Congress, I said this: the sooner we begin to make the changes necessary in our entitlement programs, the easier it will be to make those changes to make sure that these programs are sustainable for the long term. For 20 years, Washington hadn't done much. And we've waited almost too long. The sooner we get on this problem, the sooner we solve it, the sooner we'll be finished with it. Listen, everybody knows what the menu is. It's just a matter of having the guts to choose things on a menu. It's not much like going to dinner. You're going to make a choice about what you're going to have for dinner.
Right.
Well, we know what the problem is, and we know what the menu choices are. It's a matter of both parties getting together and coming to an agreement on what it is on the revenue side, what is it on the cutting side.
So I saw Tim Geithner today on his way out, and I said, so what's going to happen with the debt ceiling? I said, I don't know if Speaker Boehner is going to do it. He said, nope, you're wrong. He knows in his heart. He knows in his heart it's the right thing to do. He was smiling, but he wasn't joking.
Oh, I know.
And that was before I saw your speech. So the debt ceiling going to go up?
I think I made it pretty clear right here. Allowing the debt ceiling to go up without addressing our fiscal challenge would be the most irresponsible thing that I could do.
But are you going to let it run out last time? Because I know in the speech, you said under this president we lost our AAA.
I didn't want it to run out last time. It took me 8 months to get people interested in actually talking about fixing the problem. So
let's
start now. Why are we going to wait till after the election? Because it's inconvenient? Might impact the election? Let's begin the process and the discussions now. There's no reason to wait until we run up against the ceiling.
I mean, I feel like everyone would agree with that. But laying it out that you have to have the cuts and the reforms that are equal to or greater than the debt increase. Chris Van Hollen said that's a line in the sand, sort of saying that's the partisanship.
It is a line in the sand because Washington has kicked the can down the road, kicked the can down the road, kicked the can down the road, and the American people think we're crazy. They're ready for Washington to take action. I'm here. I'm ready to do it. Let's go.
So what exactly would you cut? I mean, if you let the Bush tax cuts go away, that's $2.8 trillion right there.
Oh, yeah. What would it do to our economy? Put tens of millions more Americans out of work? Remember, there's an appropriate level of taxation. that will generate maximum income to the federal government if we get more Americans working. So it's got to be a mix. We've got to have real economic growth, and we have to have real controls on spending. And if we don't fix the entitlement programs, if we don't fix them, they won't be there. You know, that gets lost on people. But we all know Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are going bankrupt. And it's not like there's money in the Social Security Trust Fund or the Medicare Trust Fund. It's all been spent. So why don't we just be honest with the American people about the challenge that we face? But as much as I can do, it doesn't supplant, and it's not going to be enough. You know, the president is reducing his presidency to the size of a Post-it note. This is the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, who ought to be taking an active role in this conversation. He ought to be taking, this is the #1 challenge facing our country. And he's worried about all kinds of other little things.
So the one thing that always frustrates me, though, is it's sort of rhetoric like that, to be honest, is, you know, you saying, well, he's reducing his presidency the size of a Post-it note. And Democrats say you're being intransigent and you're putting these things out there in lines in the sand, and it quickly devolves into two sides pointing fingers when people really do want to get this problem solved. But there's these...
Listen, I'm the most transparent guy in this town. And, you know, as I like to say, I speak English. You know, I have got a 22-year record of just being myself. The president and I have a very good relationship. We understand each other. We get along well. You know, we believe in a different role for the federal government. But having said that, the American people expect us to find common ground and to help solve America's problems. My greatest disappointment over the year and a half that I've been Speaker is that the president and I couldn't come to an agreement to take a big chunk out of our long-term debt. Our economy would be better today if we were able to have done that. Our fiscal situation would be better. And frankly, it would have set an example for the rest of the world. This is important to do.
So I want to just get to something that I always ask about. And you did make it clear, I think, at the podium, but I want to follow up. When you said reforms or cuts. I get what cuts are. We could all debate what they're going to be, but we all know what the word means. Reform could mean anything. First thing I said was...
Budget reforms is what I was talking about, but reforms to all kinds of different programs.
So it could be Medicare, it could be Social Security. It could also be, theoretically, closing loopholes so that some people in this country end up paying more in taxes than they're paying. And I just want to make it clear that when people talk about this whole tax increase, you may not like the word, but in your world, some people will pay more in taxes post your reform than before it, right?
Well, but the idea here is we're going to bring the rates down for all Americans and clean out the loopholes where some get off scot-free.
Right, so that math is where I could pay more, you could pay more, someone could pay more.
Every American's rates will come down.
That's the political point, I get it. But the overall payment, I could pay more, right?
Hey, we're going to bring everybody's rates down. And when you bring everybody's rates down and you clean out the underbrush, yeah, some Americans may pay more, some may pay less.
So one more thing on this debt ceiling, and I have to ask it because Chris Van Hollen brought it up here and I checked it. He was talking about the Paul Ryan budget, which obviously you supported. According to the CBO, that would require a $5.2 trillion increase in the debt ceiling over the next 10 years. Just as it was.
Yeah, the big bad,
so you'd be okay with that
the big bad House Republican budget that would just gut everything under the sun, according to my friends across the aisle, would still require a $5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling over the next 10 years. Why? Because of the great big demographic bubble, baby boomers like me, that are going to retire and continue retiring for the next 20, 25 years. It's a big challenge.
So it's not every increase in the debt ceiling that you're going to say has to be matched one for one. It's a point you're making with this one to try to force overall reform. Well, willing to borrow for your plan.
No, I don't know how long I'll be around here, but that was the line in the sand last year. It's the line in the sand this year. And guess what? As long as I'm around here, I believe that line in the sand will be there. Understand the basis for this. What I'm trying to do here is use the debt ceiling. It's an action-forcing event to force the process here to deliver more change than what it would produce on its own. It's as simple as that.
One final question, and this goes to sort of, I think, the frustration so many Americans feel with the political process right now. You've been doing this for 22 years. A lot of people have talked about you wanting to have a legacy, to make a difference, to go out and have this on John Boehner's name. But do you think democracy is part of the problem? Then in democracy, people are always going to vote for more things. They're never going to vote to take them away. Now the payroll tax is down. Good luck ever having to go back to the way it was. Good luck with a lot of these things. I mean, is democracy going to be what sends us over the cliff?
We're in our 23rd year of our experiment in democracy and representative government. And, it's not worked well. I mean, if you go back to the days of the Greeks or the Romans, there's some point at which they had problems. And they had problems because leaders along the way didn't stand up and lead. Listen, America is the greatest country on earth. We represent 2% of the world's population, yet we represent 25% of the world's economy. Why? Because Americans have had the freedom to succeed. They've also had the freedom to fail. They've had the freedom to innovate, the freedom to grow. And it's that America that gave me an opportunity to run a small business, to be here, gave you an opportunity, gave everybody in this room an opportunity. And when I was running my business, it looked to me like government was choking the goose, was laying the golden egg. More rules, more regulations, more taxes. And I got involved in this for one simple reason, to make sure that what was available to all of us is available to our kids and our grandkids. I'm a pretty simple guy. There's no Machiavellian distortions in my view of who I am or why I'm here. But America can be, once again, the greatest nation on earth. We can provide opportunities for our kids and grandkids, but we need to act. No more talking. Time for action is now.
All right. Well, I didn't even realize our clock had run out, so I have to leave it there. But thanks very much. Appreciate
Erin,
it. Thanks
thank
to all of you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Peterson back. Thank you.
We're approaching the end of the day, and as you might imagine, I'm besieged by hundreds of you insisting that I deliver my 2-hour lecture on the subtleties of Medicare Part B now. I hate to disappoint you. I know it's a profound loss, but I'm going to call this meeting to an end, to thank you for coming and to thank all of our participants for what, at least for me, has been a very stimulating day. Thank you all.